An aquiline nose is a human nose with a prominent bridge, giving it the appearance of being curved or slightly bent. The word aquiline comes from the Latin word aquilinus, an allusion to the curved beak of an eagle. While some have ascribed the aquiline nose to specific ethnic, racial, or geographic groups, and in some cases associated it with other supposed non-physical characteristics, no scientific studies or evidence support any such linkage. As with many phenotypical expressions, it is found in many geographically diverse populations. Distribution: although the aquiline nose is found among people from nearly every area of the world, it is generally associated with and thought to be more frequent in certain ethnic groups originating from southern Europe, the Middle East, North Africa, the Horn of Africa and South Asia. Some writers in the field of racial typology have attributed aquiline noses as a characteristic of different peoples or races. For example, according to anthropologist Jan Czekanowski, it is most frequently found amongst members of the Oriental race and Armenoid race. However, it is also often seen in the so-called Mediterranean race and Dinaric race, where it is known as the Roman nose, when found amongst Italians, the French and Spanish. And others, such as racial theorist and economist William Z. Ripley, have argued that it is characteristic of people of Teutonic descent. In racialist discourse, especially that of post-Enlightenment Western scientists and writers, a Roman nose has been characterized as a marker of beauty and nobility, but the notion itself is found early on in Plutarch, in his description of Mark Antony. Conversely, among Nazi racialists the aquiline nose was characteristic of Jews. However, Morris Fishberg and Jews, Race and Environment cites widely different statistics to deny that the aquiline nose is characteristic of Jews, but rather to show that this type of nose occurs in all peoples of the world. The supposed science of physiognomy, popular during the Victorian era, made the prominent nose a marker of Aryanness. The shape of the nose and the cheeks indicated, like the forehead's angle, the subject's social status and level of intelligence. A Roman nose was superior to a snub nose in its suggestion of firmness and power, and heavy jaws revealed a latent sensuality and coarseness. Among Native Americans, the aquiline nose was deemed a distinctive feature of some Native American tribes, members of which often took their names after their own characteristic physical attributes. In the depiction of Native Americans, for instance, an aquiline nose is one of the standard traits of a noble warrior type. It is so important as a cultural marker, Renee Ann Kramer argued in Cash, Color, and Colonialism, that tribes without such characteristics have found it difficult to receive federal recognition/acknowledgement from the U.S. government, resulting in failure to win benefits including tax-exempt status, reclamation rights, and the right to administer and profit from casinos. Among populations in Africa, the flat, broad nose is ubiquitous among most populations in Africa, and is noted by 19th-century writers and travelers as a mark of Negroid ancestry. It stands in opposition to the narrow aquiline, straight or convex noses, which are instead deemed Caucasian. In the 1930s, an aquiline nose was reported to be regarded as a characteristic of beauty for girls among the Tswana and Xhosa people. However, a recent scholar could not discern from the original study whether such preferences were rooted in pre-colonial conceptions of beauty, a product of colonial racial hierarchies, or some entanglement of the two. A well-known example of the aquiline nose as a marker in Africa contrasting the bearer with her contemporaries is the protagonist of Afrobenza Roanoke. Although an African prince, he speaks French, has straightened hair, thin lips, and a nose that was rising and Roman instead of African and flat. These features set him apart from most of his peers, and marked him instead as noble and on par with Europeans. According to craniometric analysis by Carlton Kuhn, aquiline noses in Africa are largely restricted to populations from North Africa and the Horn of Africa, which is more generally peopled by those of Semitic, Arab, and other non-Negroid descent. However, they are generally less common in these areas than narrow, straight noses, which instead constitute the majority of nasal profiles. Among the Copts and Feline of Egypt, two distinct nasal types reportedly exist, one with a narrow, aquiline nose accompanied by a slim face, slender jaw and thin lips. the other with a slightly lower-rooted, straighter concave nose, accompanied by a wider and lower face, a strong jaw, prominent chin, and moderately full lips. Among Nordic peoples, for Western racial anthropologists such as Madison Grant and other works, and William Z. Ripley, the aquiline nose is characteristic of the peoples they variously identify Nordic, Teutonic, or Anglo-Saxon. Grant, after defining the Nordics as having aquiline noses, went back through history and found such a nose and other characteristics he called Nordic in many historically prominent men. Among these were Alexander the Great, Dante Alighieri, all the chief men of the Renaissance, as well as King David. Grant identified Jesus Christ as having had those physical and moral attributes. See also, Anatomy of the Human Nose, references. Suggested reading, Baralski, Paul. Michelangelo's Nose, A Myth and Its Maker. John Wiley & Sons. ISBN A9780271032726A.